My guest today is Sean Perry with We Are Hope. He's based in Vermont, and I heard about Sean. CNN, for those of you who watch CNN, does a Heroes of the Year. They're nominated by their peers or community members, and they're people doing really outstanding, remarkable things for the good of mankind and nonprofits, and it'll really restore your faith in humanity. So for anybody who has not ever watched this, it's a must watch, feel good end of the year thing. Let's talk about, I know it's kind of jumping back, but some of the things that I heard you talk about many times I love the phrase emotional CPR. Let's talk about that.
Yeah, so emotional CPR is a modality that was designed and developed by Dr. Daniel Fisher and a cohort of individuals with lived experience, right? Those who struggle with significant mental health issues at some point in their life, psychosis possibly, or have been in the mental health care system and hospitalized. And so I met Dr. Fisher via another colleague that I met at another event. They connected us, and it's been kind of, we hit the ground running after that, if that makes sense. So through Dr. Fisher, I met Oryx Cohen, who is now the new CEO of the National Empowerment Center and has also since come on as the director of our board of directors. So there's a very tight-knit, community there with that. Emotional CPR is a modality that teaches the layperson how to support themselves and another human being who may be struggling with an emotional crisis, right? How do we connect, empower, and revitalize not only ourselves, but others while in the midst of an emotional crisis? And so the three phases: connect, empower, revitalize, the C, the P, and the R. It's a 2-day, in-person training, or a 4-day, virtual training, or however, it's done. It really kind of depends. And it's a way for us, Janice, to learn how to get back to the basics of humanity, right? And that's what I really love about it. It is, how do we connect with each other on a heart-to-heart level? How do I connect with what I'm feeling first, right? And learning how to recognize my emotional state so that I can then support you if need be. And what I've learned through this practice and through this modality is that it's not just the training, right? It is legit a way of being, a way of life, a way in which I interact with all people, right? I connect with what I'm feeling during a moment of connection, right? But what we also have to understand is that we cannot reach connection with any other person if we're not willing to be vulnerable. And what I've also learned is that we cannot be vulnerable if we're not willing to work through our shame and guilt first. Does that make sense? So there is this entire process that needs to happen. So when I started doing emotional CPR, it was connect, empower, revitalize. And then I became a co-author of Youth Emotional CPR and one of the co-writers of Youth Emotional CPR. And as I started teaching it to youth, which, by the way, I was the first to ever teach it to youth, to bring emotional CPR to youth. And then we had done that, but that's a longer story. But as I started teaching it to youth, what I realized was that youth really struggle to connect inside of a school building, because school has this, this entire thought process of like, I need to have my guard up and I can't let people know who I am and all this, right? That's how teens are. So what I realized was teens were no different than adults, in that the human connection, the human experience around connecting to another human being is never possible unless you're willing to be vulnerable. So I started shifting the training and I started teaching about vulnerability, shame, and guilt in order to even get the connection first.